Here I am returning home to my wife again after a week of business travel. We've only been married 3 short years, and what busy years they were. I went on my usual week-long business trip every 4 weeks. I can't say that I like being away from home, but the job suits me. By the way, my name is Jeff Bates. Here I am sitting on a plane with a beer in my hand. I'd like to take 2 or 3 double whiskeys, but I had to drive the car home. The flight lasted 2 hours, including boarding, deplaning, and baggage claim. The plane was supposed to land at 4:20 in the afternoon, and rush hour was starting ahead. I sat and thought about the 4 married women I was staying with. Every night I was exhausted. They wore me down, but I liked cheating on my wife behind her back. I was a horny bastard, to say the least. I watched the flight attendants walk around the cabin, swaying their hips to attract the attention of all the men on board. I wanted to grab them both and take them right between the chairs. A process began in my pants, which did not surprise me at all. I closed my eyes and started thinking only about my sexy wife waiting for me to come home. I'll pick her up and take her to the bedroom, and then we'll disappear from reality for a couple of hours. But then my eyes opened, and I remembered what she told me before I left 2 weeks ago. On board, I had time to think. Then I didn't attach any importance to it. I was busy with work. But now there was something important in what she told me. I went over it in my head at least 12 times. She said, "Everything will change here. Wait and see." Now I wondered what she meant. I was distracted by the flight attendant walking back and forth. "Calm down," I told myself, looking at the bulge in my pants. I texted Jill before I got on the plane. She knew what would happen as soon as I walked through the door. In the message I wrote, "I'll have dinner at the airport and wait until rush hour passes." And all I got in response was, "Okay." Not even "I love you" or "I missed you so much." While I was away, I always stayed in the same hotel and in the same room, so Jill could contact me by phone or leave a message. The food was good, and the hotel had everything I needed. Big bed. My thoughts went back to last week. What a horny bastard I am. I always took an STD test before leaving and had the result delivered to my hotel mailbox. I've even taken home inspections and had the results sent to work marked as private and intended for the recipient only. Mary, my assistant, never opened them. The plane has landed. It's time to pick up your bag from the baggage carousel. Then I went to eat. It took an hour and a half to drive home. I looked around the airport. There were many girls and married women of all shapes and sizes around. I wanted to have sex with all the pretty ones. Then I looked at my phone. There were no messages from Jill. It was strange. She always sent me a message shortly after the plane landed. So I went back to looking at the girls. I had dinner. It was already past 6, and the traffic jams must have cleared by now. I hate this endless stop-start and looking at the sides of cars while driving. After picking up my bag, I headed to the airport parking lot. I always fill up before going to the airport, so I don't have to do it after leaving. As I walked to the car, I thought back to the words Jill had told me. For some reason, they started to bother me, and I didn't know why. Jumped into the car and drove home. Even after 6, traffic was still heavy. I was stuck in traffic for about 10 minutes, and suddenly it disappeared. I was able to press the gas. The kilometers flew by. I was already halfway home when I received the message. I stopped reading. It was from Jill. The message read, "Gone." Nothing more, just gone. I stopped at a gas station and bought a bouquet of her favorite flowers and a box of chocolates. I thought I was in for a serious conversation. Then I hit the road again. I pulled up to the house and Jill's car wasn't there. Then I remembered her message, "Gone." I'm definitely out of favor, that's clear. I pressed the garage door control and it went up. Jill's car was not there. I parked on my side of the garage and opened my car door, looking at the door to the house. There were 6 tea boxes next to the door when I left. I was going to take them to the dump a few weeks ago. Now they are gone. Jill must have taken them to the dump herself. This saved me some work. Then I noticed that Jill's bike was also gone. She went out for one of her evening bike rides. That's why she sent gone. I looked around the garage and some of my stuff had been moved. Picking up my suitcase and laptop, I shrugged and headed for the door. Behind the door began a long corridor. I headed to our bedroom to put the suits away in the sliding wardrobes. All the doors were closed, so I moved on. I opened the bedroom door, and at first glance, nothing had changed. I threw the suitcase on the bed and opened it. He pulled out 3 suits and a plastic bag with dirty laundry. He turned the suitcase over and dumped its contents onto the bed. I looked into Jill's mirror built into the closet. On the sides of the mirror, everything was in order and clean. In the literal sense of the word, there was nothing. I frowned and began to sort out my things. I turned and opened the sliding closet door, expecting Jill to be shopping while I was gone. I was going to make room for my things. Opening the closet door, I saw that all my things were scattered. I looked for Jill's clothes, but they weren't there. I froze in place. "What the hell is going on?" I shouted. I dropped my things and looked into Jill's other closet. "She left me," I screamed. "What have I done?" I turned around and headed towards the other bedrooms. Jill must be kidding me. The other bedrooms were empty because we were planning to start having children next year. I walked down the corridor, stomping so hard that the pond outside the window must have rippled. Nothing was found in both bedrooms. I headed to the kitchen. The cabinets were open and the drawers were almost empty. The only thing left in the kitchen was the refrigerator freezer. I turned around and headed into the living room. He pushed the door hard, and it hit the wall with a loud bang. Looking around, I saw that almost everything had disappeared. All that was left was a rented TV, an old VCR with a remote control, and my favorite chair facing the TV. "Jill, why did you leave?" I screamed. I was probably heard on the other side of the world. Then I noticed a piece of paper taped to the TV screen. I grabbed it and tore it off, barely containing my anger. It said, "Jeff, I love you. I'm gone for a month. Furniture is in storage. I told work I took sick leave. Open the envelope that's on the TV." I looked at the envelope. It was a manila envelope full of papers. Damn it, she wants a divorce. Damn it, she's gone, and these are the horrible divorce papers I have to sign. As I extended my hand, I didn't want to open the envelope and see what was inside. "Come on, Jeff, damn it, sort this out." I opened the manila envelope. The first thing that caught my eye was our wedding photo. I looked into Jill's eyes, and she looked into mine. I sank into my chair, screaming, "Please don't divorce me. I love you with all my heart." I put our wedding photo aside. Next were photos of Jill's parents standing next to us. They were so happy that we got married. The next photo was with my parents. They were also very happy with our marriage. Our parents got along well with each other and knew that we loved each other. If Jill and I split up, it would be a huge blow to both of our families. I looked at our wedding photo again, my eyes starting to fill with tears. "Jill, Jill, please don't go," I cried. After looking into the ugly manila envelope, I pulled out handwritten notes addressed to me. I went cold. To my husband Jeff, my one and only favorite. "My dear, I have not left forever, just for a month. I'll be back before your next business trip, Friday evening. Then we will resolve several issues. 3 months ago, I hired a private detective. I took out a loan to pay his expenses. I'll pay for everything. He installed cameras and recording equipment with sound in your hotel with a large bed. I looked at the records for the last 2 months. Yes, I know you like making love. The PD also installed cameras that monitor our house outside the front door. If he tells me that a woman knocked on the door for even a millisecond, think about what I tell you. When you go to the pub, you will be watched. And if you start flirting with women, think again. The PD will follow you after work, when you go shopping, to the gym, and to sporting events. I'll pick up his report and the photos he took Friday evening. Before you start screaming, know that I went to see an old friend. This is a woman, not a man. Over the past year, many men have tried to flirt with me. They complimented me, gave me gifts at work, and invited me to lunch. Everyone had one goal: to get me into bed and maybe even convince me to divorce you and live with them. I was a loving and faithful wife to you, and I want to remain so until I am old. That position in another building that you were promoted to, if I were you, I would take it. At least you will come home to me every night, my love. Next to the VCR remote, you will find recordings of you in the hotel room. More entries will arrive tomorrow or Monday. They are numbered: blonde, no; 1, brunette, no; 2, brown-haired, no; 3, woman with gray hair, no; 4. I wanted to smash the TV into pieces, but I had to calm down by screaming and running around the room. I headed to the garage for beer. I needed more than one bottle. I took 6 and went back to the TV. Jeff, my one and only lover, watch all the entries and think long and hard. Remember our vows. I take you as my wife, to have and to hold, from this day forward, in weal and woe, in richer and in poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and cherish until death do us part, according to the holy law of God. In the presence of God, I take this oath. I take you to be my husband, to have and to hold, from this day forward, in weal and woe, in richer and in poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and cherish until death do us part, according to the holy law of God. In the presence of God, I take this oath. We exchanged rings. I give you this ring as a sign of our marriage. With my body, I honor you. All that I am, I give to you, and all that I have, I share with you in the love of God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You said it, and I repeated it. Jeff, remember the 7th commandment. You shall not commit adultery. Yes, adultery. What you were doing was adultery. Look at the notes and think long and hard. The first option is that we separate and go our separate ways. Second, we are getting divorced. When I return, I will have demands on you. I'm not going to blackmail you or take revenge, but sit down and think carefully to come to your senses. On Tuesday or Wednesday next week, you will receive a recording with me and you can think about it. Blonde, no. 1, brunette, no. 2, brown-haired, no. 3, woman with gray hair, no. 4, are they worth it? Damn, how did Jill know about my affairs with all these women? I looked at each of the tapes, and what I said to each of them shook me to the core. I walked out of the house and looked around the front door, trying to find the camera. I didn't succeed. I was going to check this every day in case Jill was deceiving me. I went out on the weekends, constantly looking in the rearview mirror. I had the feeling that dozens of cars were watching me. I wanted to find out who it was. They drove by, and I never recognized anything. I went to a football game, constantly looking around at the crowd. Nobody caught my attention. I returned home to an empty house. I heated up the finished dish. It was time to go for a pint. Walking into the George and the Dragon pub, I stopped and looked back to see who was following me. No one in a detective-like cloak caught my attention. Walking into the pub, I found a corner. I wanted to be alone and think about Jill. Deep in thought, sipping a beer, I saw 2 of my friends from the pub approach me. Jeff, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost, they told me. No, I just have a lot to think about, I told them. They sat down, and I didn't want company, but they pulled up 2 more chairs. Who are these chairs for? I asked. For our girlfriends. You'll like them, they told me. And then I remembered that Jill wrote, if you start flirting with women, think again. The detective will take photographs. I looked around the pub and tried to look into the side rooms, trying to spot men in cloaks. Then 2 girls with perfect curves stood at the edge of the table. I wanted to take them and spend the night with them in a hotel. Instead, I finished my beer and apologized. Quickly heading to the door, I went home. On Sunday night, I watched 8 tapes. I was in hell, and I couldn't sleep. On Monday, I returned to the office. I was Mr. Happy, but really Mr. Frowny, and all the girls noticed it as soon as I walked in. It was not easy to hide my sadness. I went to my office, saying good morning to my assistant in a sad voice. Mary, please bring me the files from last week, I told her. Mary usually brought only the most urgent matters, just 2 or 3. Mary was due to retire soon, so I wasn't too worried about her. I looked around, and it seemed to me that everyone was carefully watching my every move. Which one of them is spying on me? Which one of them wears a cloak? Male colleagues approached me. They wanted to know how I had spent the last weeks. I told them everything was fine. After talking with them, my mood improved a little. I looked at my desk, where there was a photo of Jill. My eyes began to fill with tears. Reaching, I turned the photo over. I was in hell. I threw myself into work, sending each completed file to the outbox so Mary could make final edits. It's time for lunch. Mary always left before me and was sometimes late returning. It has always been this way. I went to lunch, and as I walked out, I felt like my every move was being watched. How many of them wear a raincoat? I walked to my cafe, constantly looking around along the way. Which one of them wears a cloak? I went into a cafe and sat with my back to the wall in the middle of the room. I looked around, all the same faces were around. But who wears the cloak? 4 strangers, 8 people in total, entered the cafe, quickly had a snack and left. I finished my sandwiches, paid the bill, and headed back to the office. Walking through the office, I felt like someone was staring at me. I sat down at my desk, and the first thing I noticed was that Jill's photo was standing upright again. I left it upside down. Mary moved it. She came into my office with new files to process. Mary's gaze was cold. She looked at me, then at the photo, and then back at me. Without saying a word, she returned to her desk. I continued working. I placed the completed files in the outbox tray for Mary. She said goodbye by saying, "Good night, Mr. Bates." I answered her the same, "Good night." I got into the car and drove to an empty house. 2 eyes in the rearview mirror tried to determine who was watching me, disguised in a raincoat. Not a single car followed me all the way home. I stopped, and the paperboy ran up to me. "Here's your evening paper, Mr. Bates." Hell, they even made the paperboy my spy. I looked around the street, trying to figure out which neighbor was watching me, or all of them. Then an ice cream truck pulled up playing the same old tune and stopped in the same spot. Is the ice cream man watching me too? I went into the house, put the finished dish in the microwave, and sat in my chair, staring at the TV. The microwave beeped. I returned to my seat and ate alone. I was ready for a couple of pints, so headed to George and the Dragon. I stopped again to see who was following me. There was no one in sight wearing a detective-like cloak. I went into the pub and found a corner. I wanted to be alone and think about Jill. That night, many strangers came to the pub. I finished my beer and went home. At work the next day, it was the same thing, until Friday of the first week without Jill. The note from Jill never arrived. For some reason, she said that she should come on Tuesday or Wednesday next week. All other entries have arrived. A blonde, a brunette, a brown-haired woman, and a woman with gray hair. I watched all the tapes and listened to what I said to each of them while making love to them. I wanted to fall into the deepest hole in the world and ask someone to cover me with dirt. I thought I was going straight to hell. On Saturday morning, I got up early. I heard the milkman delivering milk to other houses. He stopped right in front of my house. Damn, the milkman is watching me to someone else in a raincoat. There are only spies around me. I walked out to the front door and looked around, trying to find the camera. I never found anything. I turned the water to the coldest setting to take my mind off Jill. I came out of the shower shivering from the cold, got dressed, and went shopping. In the car, I constantly looked in the rearview mirror. Walking around the city, I kept looking around. It was already past 5 in the evening when I returned home, parked in the garage, and headed towards the door that led to a long hallway. I went into the kitchen and put away my shopping. I put the kettle on for tea. I wonder if there is a post office. There were flyers, one letter addressed to Jill and one to me, and another package addressed to me with Jill's handwriting. The moment of truth has come, I thought to myself. What did Jill write down? A long list of demands. Tears filled my eyes as I tore the parcel open. "Jill, Jill, please come back to me," I shouted at the top of my voice. I put the recording on the TV next to our wedding photo. I didn't want to look. I left and went to mow the lawn, taking out my anger on him. Saturday night came, and I wasn't going anywhere alone. My only conversation was with my thoughts about Jill. I put another prepared dish in the microwave and waited for it to heat up. While I waited, I took out half a dozen strong ales and the glass I had bought that afternoon. I placed them near the chair in front of the TV. I ate my dinner and missed Jill's cooking, and most of all, her. Standing in front of the TV, I looked at our wedding photo. I looked at the photographs of our parents. Their faces changed. They looked at me reproachfully. I shook my head, and the photo changed. I knew exactly what they thought about me. I needed to get my head out of my ass quickly, or my marriage would end. The phone rang. I ran towards him, praying it was Jill. It was one of my colleagues from work. He asked a few questions, and we said goodbye. I took a glass and poured myself some strong ale, placing it next to the chair. Taking Jill's note, I opened the box. A note fell out. It said, "This is your devoted, loving, faithful wife. Remember the body that I deprived you of for so long before we got married." My hand clenched the note in a fist. I screamed for Jill. All my memories of her flashed before my eyes. I took our wedding photo and placed it on the floor. Then I put in the recording and sat down to watch it. I saw that the camera was already installed in the right place. Jill must have tried several times before. Our bedroom appeared on the screen, and Jill's head appeared at the bottom of the bed, rising from the floor. What a beauty she is. I wanted to kiss the screen and climb inside the TV. Jill stood up and turned her back to the camera. Then she sat down at the foot of the bed. Jill was as naked as the day she was born. She held out both her hands so I could see the shape of her breasts. I wanted to kiss her on the screen. She turned her body to the left, then to the right so that I could see the shape of her breasts. My hands pressed against the screen. I wanted to hold them. God, how I wanted my wife right then. I missed her for less than a week. Jill played with her breasts as best she could, imagining that I was doing it. Her hands went down. Looking into the camera, she said, "This is yours and yours alone. Think about it." I wanted to stick my head into the TV and kiss my wife. I was in hell watching TV. Jill relaxed on the bed, leaning on the pillow and raising her legs, immersed in her sensations. Her movements became more confident. She sounded louder, carried away by the process. I, sitting next to her, watched her, feeling the tension between us growing. My hands began to move in rhythm with her movements. The sensations grew, and I felt excitement take over me. Jill also did not hold back her emotions. Her voice became deeper and more passionate when she said my name. We were both in our own world, immersed in common feelings and emotions that washed over us like a wave. Jill continued, and I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, feeling her calling my name again and again. As our emotions peaked, we seemed to feel both joy and relief. Jill looked happy and at peace, as if we had formed an even deeper connection. She sat down, looking at the camera, and said, "Jeff, I'm yours forever. Is it worth it for those 4 prostitutes you're staying at the hotel with?" Jill brought me to my senses. Why the hell should I want someone else when I have her all mine? Jeff, get your head out of your ass now. On Sunday, I watched Jill's recording. It was the same thing I did over and over again. On Monday, I came to work, and the first thing I did was turn over Jill's photo. I buried myself in my work, putting each task in my file for Mary to finish. It's lunchtime, and I meet Mary at the door. She knew for sure that something was wrong. Eyes followed my every step. Someone in a raincoat. I walked down to my cafe, looking over my shoulder every step of the way. Someone in a raincoat, in my cafe. I sat with my back to the wall. Someone in a raincoat, finished my sandwiches, paid the bill, and headed back to the office. In the office, I felt my eyes burning my back. I sat down at the table, and the first thing I noticed was that Jill's photograph was standing upright. I left it upside down. Mary moved it. She entered the office with even more files. There was an ice wall between us. Mary looked at me, then at the photo, and then back at me without saying a word. She returned to her desk. I continued to work. I sent everything I finished to my outbox for Mary. She said goodbye. "Good night, Mr. Bates." I answered her the same. "Good night." I went home, ate the finished dish, drank a glass of beer, and watched Jill's tape again. For the next 2 weeks, everything was the same. If Jill played poker, she would be very good at it. She won every game with a crushing score, day after day. Over the weekend, I wanted female company, but not someone random, but my Jill. I wanted to find the cameras that were pointed at the front door and find out who wears this cloak. All day Saturday, I inspected every brick, roof, chimney, gutter, chimney, window, and flower box on all my neighbors' houses. They must have thought I had become some weird guy. Once again, I sat down with a finished dish and a glass of beer, and then watched Jill's recording. I was in hell. No, I've already been there and back so many times in the past few weeks. On Sunday, I was still trying to find the cameras. It was already 1 o'clock in the afternoon. On the other side of the street, there were 3 lampposts. On top of each of them sat some kind of bird. One in front of my house was facing my front door, one was facing left, and one was facing right. They didn't move. Then a flock of birds swooped down on them and flew away. I took my binoculars out of the garage and looked at the birds. On the chest of one of them was a camera lens. Private Detective Jill knew his stuff. No one in our area wore raincoats. I realized I had a serious problem with Jill. Sorry is simply not enough. Wait a minute. The George and the Dragon pub has security cameras facing inwards, and the cafe where I have lunch also has surveillance cameras. Detective Gill was watching me from a distance, behind the TV screen. He knew his job inside and out. Jill must have told him about my daily schedule. There were no men in raincoats. But my every move was recorded for Jill. So on Sunday night, I went to George and the Dragon and ordered myself a nice dinner and a few beers. I was still deep in thought when 2 of my lonely friends from the pub, the same ones I had dumped a few weeks ago, approached me. "Sit down," I told them. They pulled up 4 chairs. "So your girlfriends are coming," I said. When I finished, 2 girls with the right curves were next to the table. They sat down opposite me. We talked for about an hour. I finished my last glass of beer and excused myself to go home. On Monday at work, everything was as usual. But on Thursday, everything changed. It was almost time for lunch at Mary's. Mary walked into my office and said, "It's time to sort this out. Come with me and I won't take no for an answer," Mary said in a stern voice. There was no way I could refuse her. I stood up and followed her out of the office building. We went to the park across the street and found a bench. "Okay, mister, I want to know what's going on with you," Mary said in a determined voice. I looked at her and pretended nothing had happened. "Mister, what's happening to you?" Mary repeated in a stern voice. She repeated this question 3 more times. It was time to stop pretending. I told Mary everything. "Now listen to me, mister, I'll tell you a few things," Mary said in a soft, caring voice. Mary then told me the following. 3 months ago, while you were away, Jill came into the office. She told me you were cheating on her and hired a private investigator to get proof. She also said that she loves you and doesn't want a divorce. We met during lunch and tried to reason with you. And so it was until your last trip. But the betrayals happened somewhere else. If you remember, I tried to change your hotel, but you said no. I even booked your dinner. Mr. Bates, Jill loves you and wants to live with you until you are old and gray together, and she wants to start having children soon. She told you to think long and hard. If I were you, I would put my thoughts in order. If you don't, you'll have another failed marriage. This position is in another building. If I were you, I would take it today. When you return home, and your new assistant is 45 years old, she is married, she has children, and she loves her husband. Get your head out of your ass and wake up. I felt like a schoolboy being told off. Mary and I went to my cafe. I paid for sandwiches and coffee. We barely spoke, but Mary and Jill were right. We returned to the office. I went to my boss and told him I wanted to accept the promotion. He was glad that I accepted the new position. This brought me to the same level as him. I told Mary I accepted the promotion. Mary spent the rest of the day running back and forth, helping me get ready for the next week. I finished the last remaining tasks. It was time to go home. Mary said goodbye. "Good night, Mr. Bates." I replied, "Good night and thank you." I went to George and the Dragon, had a pint and dinner. I was thinking about how to explain everything to Jill. I took Jill's note and put it back. I went to bed, tossing and turning all night, thinking about Jill. The next day, I came to work to complete a few remaining tasks. Mary gave me all the files needed for the next week. She booked me the same hotel. I was puzzled. Mary and I went to lunch, and she continued to make her rules. We returned to the office and were greeted for accepting my new position. Everything was done, and before Mary left, I kissed her on the cheek. We both knew what it was for. She whispered in my ear, "Do the right thing for the woman you love." I left the office early and went to George and the Dragon, ordered a light dinner and drank water, and bought a bottle of wine. Jill was supposed to come that evening. I found myself in hell again. I got the house in order, which, in fact, was what was needed. Remade the bed. I prayed that this would be where we went for the rest of the night. I brought 2 upholstered folding chairs from the garage. It was already after 6 when Jill came in. I ran to her with open arms to hug and kiss her tightly. When I was getting close, Jill put out both hands to stop me. "Jill, I want to hug and kiss you," I told her. "I know, but not now," she answered without any emotion in her voice. Jill noticed 2 upholstered folding chairs in the middle of the room and walked over to one of them. She had a bag on her shoulder and sat down. "Guilt?" I suggested it to Jill. "No, a cup of tea would be nice," said Jill. I made 2 cups of tea, and we didn't talk. I felt the room getting colder. I handed Jill her cup of tea. On her lap lay another, terrible brown envelope. I didn't want to talk, so I sat down with my tea. I stopped by my private investigator for photos, a report, and notes on you for the last month. "Would you like to see them?" Jill said. "Can?" I asked. Jill handed me a brown envelope. I opened it. There was only a report inside. "Jill, where are the photographs and records of me?" I asked hopefully. "Jeff, there are no pictures or notes, because it looks like you listened to me when I said, 'Think long and hard.'" "Jeff, I'm here to listen to what you have to tell me," Jill said. "Jill, can I kiss you?" I asked. "No, I want to hear what you have to say first," Jill replied. I looked more closely at Jill. She was dressed like she was going to a party, wearing a red dress that I had never seen before. So I complimented her on her outfit. She didn't pay attention to it. "Jeff, I came to hear what you have to tell me, so get started," she said. I spoke, but Jill was silent for almost an hour. Then there was a knock on the door. Jill stood up, opened the door, and greeted her friend. Her name was Pat. I didn't like Pat one bit. She was vulgar. Pat was dressed like she was getting ready for a slumber party, and I knew what she was up to. Jill was ready to go with her. I was furious, to say the least. "Come on, Jill. We'll be late for the club if you don't hurry," Pat said. Jill turned to me and said, "I'll see you tomorrow night at the same time, as long as I'm not exhausted or too tired." "Jill, please stop. We need to talk." "I love you," I told Jill. Jill and Pat walked out the door to a waiting taxi and headed into town. I was furious all night. He stomped up and down. If Jill slept with someone, I will find him, and he will be dead within seconds of me meeting him. I went to bed, tossed and turned all night, and then woke up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I ate something and waited for Jill to come. I hoped she would come early. Looking out the window for the rest of Saturday afternoon. It was already past 6 when Jill entered. I wanted to hug and kiss her tightly. Jill held out both hands to stop me. "Jill, I want to hug and kiss you," I told her. "I know, but not now," she replied. Jill was again dressed for going out on the town in a blue dress, another one I had not seen before. I had no choice but to offer her a cup of tea, coffee, or a glass of wine. "Jeff, I came to listen a second time to what you have to tell me," Jill said. Jill, can I kiss you? I asked. No, I want to hear what you have to say first, Jill replied. We sat down, and I again began to chatter about something unintelligible. Then there was a knock on the door. Jill stood up and opened the door. It was her friend Pat. Pat was dressed for the party again, another time on her back with her legs spread. Jill was ready to go with her again. I was furious. Hurry up, Jill. We'll be late for the club if you don't move right now, Pat said. Jill turned to me and said, I'll see you tomorrow night at the same time, if I'm not as exhausted as I was from yesterday's fun. Jill, please, I need to tell you something, I said to Jill. Jill and Pat walked out the door to a waiting taxi and headed into town. Now, Jill, if someone took you last night and someone is going to do it tonight, I will find out who it is and he will be dead, I thought. Okay, Jill, this will be a divorce for us. When I return in a week, I will decide everything. I went to George and the Dragon and got drunk. On Sunday evening, I waited for Jill to arrive. She entered. Jill, I want to hug and kiss you, I told her. I know, but not now, she replied. Jill was dressed to go out on the town again, this time in a green dress, another one I hadn't seen before. Jeff, I came to listen for the third time to what you have to tell me, Jill said. Jill, I want to kiss you, I said. No, I want to hear what you have to say first, Jill replied. We sat down, and I again chartered something inaudible. Then there was a knock on the door. Jill stood up and opened the door. It was her friend Pat again. Everything repeated itself as in the previous 2 nights. Jill and Pat walked out the door to a waiting taxi and headed into town. I packed my things that Sunday evening. On Monday morning, I got ready for work to pick up the files that Mary had prepared for me. I picked up my plane tickets and headed out for my last week of business travel. Mary didn't ask or say anything except, see you next week. I read the files Mary prepared for me on the plane. I completed all the company's business and headed to my hotel. It was already past 5, so I went to take a shower before dinner, which was scheduled for 6, as Mary had arranged. I sat at my table, looking at the menu. Exactly at this time, a blonde woman, one of those whom I knew as number 1, came to the table and sat down, taking the menu in her hands. She started the conversation. Should we skip dinner? I didn't notice Jill, who was watching us at the other end of the room. She waited for the blonde to sit down. Jill walked across the hall, and all the men stared at her. She looked like a million. My mouth opened in surprise. Jill, what are you doing here? I asked. Jill sat down and took out some papers from her purse and handed them to the blonde. I know your name, your husband's name, and your children's names. I even know where you work and the names and addresses of your 3 other lovers. And I have tapes of you and Jeff having sex in this hotel. If I were you, I would leave right now. If you don't do this, I'll call the police and say that you're a prostitute and that you offered Jeff sex for money. Then I will call your husband and tell him everything I know about you. He will then receive the records at work. I'm sure divorce is not far off. The choice is yours. Either have sex with him or leave him, Jill said. The blonde got up and left. Jill, what are you doing here? I asked. I'm trying to get your head straight. Let's have dinner and talk, Jill said. Jill, when did you arrive? I asked her. I was on the next flight after yours, and I waited until 6 o'clock to get on, Jill replied. Jill, I have a lot to say and explain to you, I said. Not now. Let's have a nice honeymoon dinner, please, Jill replied. I ordered our first dinner we had on our honeymoon. I looked at Jill all evening, and she looked at me too. My eyes were full of love, and so were Jill's. It was already past 9. Jill stood up and headed to the ladies' room. I remained waiting for her return. She didn't return. I searched the entire hotel, but didn't find her. I checked with the front desk to see if she was registered as Mrs. Jill Bates. There was no one by that name on the guest list. Where the hell did she go? I went up to my room, hoping she would be there, but she wasn't. I lay in bed and looked at the ceiling, trying to figure out what she was up to. I called the front desk and asked them to wake me up early in the morning. The next day, Tuesday, I met with more clients. I returned to the hotel by 5. I sat at my table, looking at the menu. Exactly at this time, a black-haired woman, known to me as number 2, came to the table and sat down, taking the menu in her hands. Jill walked across the hall. It was a repeat of Monday night's scene. Jill said the same thing she told the blonde. The black-haired woman stood up and left. Jill, I have a lot to say and explain to you, I said. Not now. Let's have another honeymoon dinner, please, Jill replied. I ordered our second dinner we had on our honeymoon. We looked at each other, and I wanted to ask her why she left the hotel last night without saying a word to me. It was already past 9. Jill stood up and headed to the ladies' room. I knew that would be the last time I would see her that evening. On Wednesday and Thursday, I met with more clients. At 6 p.m., Jill reappeared and did the same to the brown-haired woman, number 3, and the gray-haired woman, number 4. I expected Jill to get up at 9 and head to the ladies' room, but she didn't. Jeff, I want to see the envelope in your pocket, Jill said. What envelope is in my pocket? I asked. Jeff, the ones that are marked personal and confidential, the ones that Mary never opens. What about the ones that were sent to the hotel mailbox when I got back? Jill asked. Jill, I don't know what you're talking about, I replied. Jeff, I'll ask again, or I'm leaving it's up to you, Jill said. I had no other choice. Jill turned out to be an excellent poker player. I began to understand this. I took out letters sent to work and to the hotel. All of them had clinic logos. They described the tests. All STD tests were negative. Jill read them one by one. Then she looked at me and said, Jeff, I read all the ones that were sent to work. Mary suspected that you were hiding something, and I read them at home. When you were sleeping, I watched you much more closely than you're behind me. If even one of them was positive, you would never make love to me again, and I would immediately leave, Jill said. Jill held me in her arms like a doll, and there was no doubt about it. What a poker player she was. Jeff, when you return home, I will forgive you for cheating. You will accept the promotion, and we will start all over again as newlyweds. But all the reports, photographs, and recordings will be under lock and key with me. And about that recording, what I did, I'll still think about. Destroying it or leaving it to remind you of me, Jill said. Jill, I want to know what happened that Friday night in every detail. You were dressed for the murder in a red dress. The one I've never seen you in before. I paid you a compliment. You were ready to go out with this woman, whom I absolutely cannot stand. You turned to me and said, "See you tomorrow evening at the same time." I shouted, "Jill, please stop. We need to talk. I love you." You both walked out the door, waiting for a taxi, and went into town. I was in hell. Then on Saturday night, I wanted to know in detail what happened. You were dressed for murder again in a blue dress, another one that I had never seen before. I want to hug and kiss you, I said, but you answered, I know, but not now. Then this woman, Pat, came. You turned to me and said, I'll see you tomorrow night at the same time, if I'm not as exhausted as I was from yesterday's fun. You both walked out the door to the waiting taxi and headed into town. I was in hell. I went to George and the Dragon and got drunk. Then on Sunday evening, I again wanted to find out in detail what happened. You were dressed for murder once again, now in a green dress, which I had never seen either. I want to hug and kiss you, I said, but you answered, I know, but not now. Then that woman, Pat, came again. You both walked out the door to the waiting taxi and headed into town. Please tell me what kind of sex you had, I said, with tears in my eyes, holding my head in my hands. Jeff, you won't believe me, but it's the truth. As they say in court, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. I stayed with my parents overnight on Thursday. I talked to my mom and asked her what I should do. Pat dropped me off at my parents' house for all 3 nights, and I stayed with them. Mom told me to come to the hotel on Monday and show me all the information I had about those 4 women. You have to agree that it worked. Jeff, I have loved you with all my heart and soul since the day we met, and I'm in love with you. even though you cheated on me. Like I said, I want to start over as newlyweds. Now stop crying, lift your head and kiss me like never before. We kissed, and I felt like a 16-year-old boy again. We stopped, and I heard, "Now let's go to your room or mine." We woke up in the morning. I held my wife in my arms with the biggest smile on my face. Jill's eyes opened. She asked, "What time is the flight?" I answered her, and the next 3 hours passed quickly. On the flight home, we kissed like newlyweds. The airport was crowded, but all I saw was her. We arrived home. I picked Jill up and carried her over the threshold. We headed to our bedroom. Jill knew I had a high level of sexual desire, and we only stayed in bed for an hour. I was hungry, and so was Jill, so we went to George and the Dragon for something to eat. We returned home and woke up, and it was already Saturday. Jill cooked breakfast in my shirt. I wrapped my arms around her waist, kissing her neck and then her earlobe, which always drove her crazy. Jill turned around and put her arms around my neck. I somehow turned off the stove. My hands were on her waist. I picked her up and headed in one direction. I don't know where I got the strength for the next short 10 minutes. We showered together and got dressed. Jill looked at her watch and picked up her phone, calling the storage company. She asked if they could bring our furniture back to the house today. She was told yes, but due to the short storage time, there would be an additional charge. 2 hours later, I watched our belongings return to the house. Jill paid the extra fee and they left. I looked around the house and felt good. But I had to prove to Jill that I had started to change. My new approach had to work quickly and decisively. I picked up the phone and called the Royal Restaurant. I ordered dinner for the two of us and asked to reserve a quiet corner for 7 o'clock. I even ordered an appetizer, main course, and dessert, all of Jill's favorites, and 2 bottles of champagne. Jill said, "What are you up to?" I replied, "We're eating out tonight. You need to be ready no later than 6:45. I have to order a taxi for that time." Jill smiled, came up to me, and kissed me. I had to control myself. Jill went into our bedroom and laid out clothes on the bed that I had never seen before. It was all sexy lingerie in different colors. Then I heard Jill call me into the bedroom. "Jeff, what do you want me to wear tonight?" she asked. I looked at the bed and almost cried with delight. "The red dress I've never seen before. The same one I complimented you in. With that set of underwear, if it even has enough fabric in it," I replied. I was ready to throw Jill on the bed, looking into her eyes. "No, no, you'll have to wait," she said, running out of the bedroom. I followed Jill, hugged her tightly, and gave her a long, passionate kiss. Then I told her to get ready while I changed in the other room. She kissed me again and disappeared. I went back to the bedroom to get some clothes for the evening. Everything I planned to wear was hanging on the door frame. I took them and went to change clothes. The panties I wore were so tight that it was difficult for me to breathe. I went downstairs and waited for Jill to appear. She slowly walked down the stairs. I looked at her and wanted us to go back upstairs. "Come here, I want to kiss you," I said. "No way in the world, you'll have to wait," Jill said with a smile. The same smile that I adored. I heard the sound of a taxi car horn. We went to the Royal Restaurant. Jill took the menu and studied it thoughtfully. I pretended to do the same. I suggested 1 or 2 dishes and Jill did the same. She looked at the prices. This went on for about 30 minutes until the first bottle of champagne arrived. "Sir, your dinner is ready. Can we serve it?" asked the waiter. "Please serve," I replied. Jill looked at me as soon as the waiter left. "Jeff, what did you order for dinner? Have you seen the prices here?" "Yes, it's a special night for the woman I love, and she's the only one I'm going to make love to. I promise that to you now and forever, if you believe me." Each dish was served at the correct intervals. We had time to talk and dance. I kept fidgeting in these shorts. Jill smiled as she watched me suffer. We ate our dinner slowly and reminisced about the short years we were married. All night I struggled with those tight panties that Jill left me. She knew all the time that I was suffering. I asked for the bill and Jill wanted to know how much it cost. I said it's not enough for the only woman I love. Would you like to dance before we go? Jeff, go to the men's room and take off those underpants that are 2 sizes too small for you and free yourself before we get home. I ran to the men's room and threw away my panties. When I returned to Jill, a man was trying to flirt with her. I patted him on the shoulder. Sorry, buddy, this is my date. Jill smiled and said, I bet you feel better now. They were tight, yeah. We headed for the door and got into the taxi. I picked her up and carried her into the only room in the house. I woke up at 10 and Jill was fast asleep. We were still naked and completely exhausted, I must say. Our lives were back. On the right path, thank God. Jill woke up on Sunday morning. I tried my best to prepare breakfast. Jill woke up in the kitchen wearing my shirt that she bought the night before. She pushed me away and finished her breakfast. We had breakfast. I said, let's go to your parents. I want to thank your mother. Jill jumped up, wrapped her arms around my neck, and gave me a long, passionate kiss. I tried my best not to carry her back to the bedroom, but I did it anyway. I had to work on a new sheet of paper that I turned over. We were at her mother's house, and her father was watching TV. Her mother was staring at me, and I knew why. Tea or coffee, her mother said. We all responded with coffee. She entered the kitchen. I asked Jill to leave the appointment for her father until I returned. I went into the kitchen to talk to her mother. Yes, I know that you know everything from Jill, but I'm turning over a new leaf. I promise you that from now on I will be faithful to Kill. If I don't, I'll throw myself in the river with a bag of bricks tied to my neck. You can bet, I told her mother. Her mother told me if you cheat on Jill again, and I will find out. I will cut off what is between your legs and throw it into the river, and you can bet on that. I looked at her mother. She was telling me the truth. I hung my head. I believed you would do it, I told her mother. I have one question for you, but I would like to know the truth, I told her mother. What is this? She said. Did Jill stay here 4 nights? I mean, she came by. On Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday evenings. You told her, arrive at the hotel. Monday, and show the women all the information. Jill knew about the 4 of them, I said. Jeff, the answer is yes. Mom, trust me. I will be the best husband you can have. How many grandchildren would you like? I said. She laughed, and a second later Jill was already in the kitchen. I hugged Jill and kissed her. Put her to bed. Time for that later. The coffee is getting cold. It was time for me to go home. I held her mother and whispered in her ear, trust me. On the way home, Jill asked me what was said. I said it. Your mother said, if you cheat on Jill again, and I will find out. I will cut off what is between your legs and throw it into the river, and you can bet on that. Jill laughed. Jeff, she would do it, that's for sure, Jill said between laughs. Jeff, what do you want to do now? I know what I want to do, but we're going to walk to the park and talk if we get a chance too, I said. I was going to dinner. We had a salad that we bought on the way home from a walk in the park. We sat and watched TV. We were both tired and made love twice, before I held Jill in my arms and fell asleep. On Monday, I went to my old office to pick up my things, but really to see Mary. Mary looked at me and said, back on track? I walked up to her and kissed her on the cheek. I want to meet your husband when you retire. At my place or yours, whichever is more convenient for you, I said to Mary. I will retire in a month. We're going away for 3 weeks to our cozy little nest. So in 8 weeks, on Saturday evening, you can bring 4 bottles of wine. That should be enough, Mary replied. With these words, Mary helped me walk to my new office. The first thing she put was a photo of Jill and me in the center of my desk. Mary left me to deal with the rest. We walked into a large office, and Mary introduced me to all my new employees. But she saved one person for last. Jeff, excuse me, Mr. Bates. This is Doris, your new assistant. She's 45, married with kids. She likes to go home on time. Keep that in mind. And she's just as nice, like me, in the office, believe me. Doris will help you get comfortable. Mary said and left. Doris was helping me get comfortable, and she said, "I'll show you everything you need." Over the course of the day, she showed me everything I needed to know. Over the next 2 weeks, I got used to my new job with Doris's help, and everything was fine at home. The following week, on Monday evening, Jill asked me a question. "Jeff, where are the records of those 4 women?" she asked me. "Under the TV, out of sight." "Why do you need it?" I answered. "Take them and follow me," Jill said. I took the notes and followed Jill into the garage. She had a hammer in her hand. "Put them down," she said. She smashed them to pieces. "Jeff, we need to talk," Jill said. I've heard this phrase too many times in the past. I was terrified of what Jill was going to tell me. I was on pins and needles. "Jeff, don't worry. I haven't met anyone else. Even if I had, they wouldn't have had a chance. I love only you and will always love only you. I want to ask you something about that recording that I made myself. About the one where I'm sitting on the bed, naked as on the day I was born. You know the one I'm talking about, the one I sent you. It should have arrived on Tuesday or Wednesday." "Yes, Jill, but she came on Saturday." "Jeff, let me finish. This is important to me." "Jeff, please don't be embarrassed that I'm going to ask you. I want to know how many times you've watched this tape, and how many times you've satisfied yourself by watching me on TV." "Oh my God, Jill, you had a camera here and you filmed me." "No, but I know how long you can go without making love to me. So please tell me," Jill said. I wanted to get up and run out of the house. I didn't want to tell her, but I had to. This new lifestyle that I am trying to live has been important now and always. I sat down opposite Jill, looked her in the eyes, and told her the following. I took my glass and poured myself some strong ale. I placed it next to the chair. Taking your note, I opened the box. Then a note fell out. You wrote, "This is your devoted, loving, faithful wife. Remember the body that I deprived you of for so long before we got married." My hand clenched the note in a fist. I screamed for you, Jill, my love. All my memories of you flashed before my eyes. I took our wedding photo and placed it on the floor. Then I inserted the recording and sat down to watch. The screen showed our bedroom. Then your head appeared in the frame. I looked at the picture of you, how beautiful you are. I wanted to kiss the screen and climb into the TV. You sat at the foot of the bed, naked as the day you were born. You then shook your chest from side to side. My hands pressed against the screen. I wanted to hold them. God, I have to say, I wanted you, Jill, right then. I've missed you for less than a week. You then sat down, looking into the camera, and said, "Jeff, I'm yours forever. Is it worth it for the sake of those 4 girls of easy virtue with whom you are staying at the hotel?" Jill brought me to my senses. Why the hell should I want someone else when I have her, all mine? Jeff, get your head out of your ass now. And every night until Wednesday, before you came that Thursday, I satisfied myself with your recording. Jeff, you watched it every night, and you never cheated? Jill asked me. Yes, Jill, remember you said that cameras were watching me and that you had a detective following me, taking photos and watching where I go. I wanted you so bad that I had to do what you said. I wanted our marriage to last forever. You said you wanted to grow old and gray with me, and I want that too. Jill, I love you, and what I was doing has now stopped. I swear to you on a stack of Bibles that I will never do this again. If I do this, I will drown myself in the river with a bag of bricks around my neck. You can be sure of it. We kissed and kissed again. We became one again. Jeff, I need to tell you something. What, my dear? I asked. Jeff, last week, while you were away, I stopped taking my birth control pills. I'm pregnant. I'm finally going to become a father. Is it a boy or a girl? It doesn't matter. The main thing is that it's ours, I said. Jeff, we need to be careful. I want our child to be perfect in every way. Weeks and months passed. Jill helped me deal with my sexual desire with her hands and my hands. Jill returned from the clinic and announced that we were having twin boys. We first went to her parents' house to tell them the news. Her mother looked at me with the biggest smile she could give. Then we went to my parents and told them. Both sets of grandparents were delighted. The boys were born. We named our firstborn Henry Bates in honor of my father. We named our second son Brady Bates in honor of Jill's father. And then we had a new problem. When both grandparents were in the house, the grandmothers immediately took control. But it gave Jill some rest. Grandfathers had to wait their turn to hold their grandchildren. Jill went back on the pill for 8 weeks, but that stretched out to 12. And again, she became pregnant. This time, we had twin girls. We named our first daughter Rose Jill Bates after Jill's mother. We named our second daughter Ann Jill Bates after my mother. In the last 2 months before the girls were born, I was hospitalized. I walked out of there bow-legged, like a cowboy. I had a vasectomy. Now we had a complete family, but there was one more thing to do. We visited Mary and her husband. They have seen our boys since they were born. Now they needed to see the girls. The way Mary helped Jill bring me to my senses, they became like great-grandparents to our children. For me, when I returned home from work, I played with 4 children for hours. Jill's mom and my mom were constantly there, helping Jill. I'm sorry, they just took matters into their own hands and looked after Jill. So Jill and I went back to our old lives. The grandparents even took turns taking the kids on weekends so Jill and I could get away for the night. Thank God I had a vasectomy. That's all I can say. Yes, as the kids got older, I became less active in bed. But it didn't matter, we had a loving family. The children have grown up. Jill and I are growing old and gray together, but we love each other just as much as ever. All I can say is that I regret ever cheating on Jill. I was one of those fools who couldn't keep it in my pants. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.